Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's go ahead and get week 38 of today's Tolkien Times underway with Mailbag Monday. Now, Becca D. writes in with this question, which invites a lot of speculation. She says, how do you think Turin and Tuor's almost encounter at the pools of Ivrin might have gone if they'd actually met? Do you think it would have had an impact on the rest of the events in the Silmarillion? Well, I think we should start with a quick reminder of that moment, and the best example of it comes from Unfinished Tales and of Tuor and his coming to Gondolin. Now, this is after Ulmo has appeared to Tuor, and he has encountered Voronwe, who has said he will guide him to Gondolin. Even as he spoke thus, they heard a cry in the woods, and they stood still as gray stones, listening. But the voice was a fair voice, though filled with grief, and it seemed that it called ever upon a name as one that searches for another who is lost. And as they waited, one came through the trees, and they saw that he was a tall man, armed, clad in black, with a long sword drawn. And they wondered, for the blade of the sword also was black, but the edges shone bright and cold. Woe was graven in his face, and when he beheld the ruin of Ivrin, he cried aloud in grief, saying, Ivrin, Failivrin, Gwyndor and Beleg, here once I was healed, but now never shall I drink the draught of peace again. Then he went swiftly away towards the north, as one in pursuit or on an errand of great haste, and they heard him cry, Failivrin, Finduilas, until his voice died away in the woods. But they knew not that Nargothrond had fallen, and this was Turin, son of Hurin, the Black Sword. Thus, only for a moment and never again, did the paths of those kinsmen, Turin and Tuor, draw together. Let's go ahead and go to the Silmarillion, chapter 21 of Turin Turambar. Now, nothing is said there of their near meeting, but we can place it in the chronology of his life's events with very minimal digging. We get the bit about the defilement wrought there by the passage of Glaurung, when we read that, and Glaurung the Uruloki passed over Anfauglith, and came thence into the north vales of Sirion, and there did great evil. Under the shadows of Ered Wethrin he defiled the Aethel Ivrin, and thence he passed into the realm of Nargothrond, and burned the Talath Dirnan, the guarded plain between Narog and Teglin. Now, after that, the warriors of Nargothrond went out and got clobbered, Gwyndor got himself killed, and Turin was frozen by Glaurung near the bridge that he'd so foolishly had built. After he is released by the dragon, we read this. And Turin hastened along the ways to the north, through the lands now desolate between Narog and Teglin, and the fell winter came down to meet him. For in that year snow fell ere autumn was past, and spring came late and cold. Ever it seemed to him as he went that he heard the cries of Finduilas, calling his name by wood and hill, and great was his anguish. But his heart being hot with the lies of Glaurung, and seeing ever in his mind the orcs burning the house of Hurin, or putting Morwen and Nienor to torment, he held on his way and turned never aside. At last, worn by haste in the long road, for 40 leagues and more he had journeyed without rest, he came with the first ice of winter to the pools of Ivrin, where before he had been healed. But they were now but a frozen mire, and he could drink there no more. Now, the reason that I went to these passages is because I wanted to establish when in Turin's story this non-encounter took place. After all, that's going to give us an idea of how that meeting would have gone had they spoken to one another. And it's in that passage with Turin that tells us just about all we need to know. Here is a man in utter despair. In the last few days, he's watched Nargothrond fall, his army routed, his friend Gwyndor killed, and he's been mentally assaulted by an evil dragon who is furthering the curse of Morgoth. He's traveled 120 miles without rest, and he is in about as foul a mood as a man can be. I'm not sure I'd want to step up and say, hey, I think you might be my cousin. And the thing is, that's even more true when we look at the Children of Hurin, chapter 11, the fall of Nargothrond. Now, before all that bad stuff went down, messengers from Círdan have come bearing a message from Ulmo. They say, shut the doors of the fortress and go not abroad. Cast the stones of your pride into the loud river, that the creeping evil may not find the gate. That conversation didn't go well. Armenas, in particular, had words for Turin. I asked because I doubted what here seems believed, for little indeed do you resemble the kin of Hador, whatever your name. And what do you know of them? Said Turin. Hurin I have seen, answered Arminas, and his fathers before him. And in the wastes of Dorlomen I met with Tuor, son of Huor, Hurin's brother, and he is like his fathers, as you are not. That may be, said Turin, though of Tuor I have heard no word ere now. Now they go on with Turin saying he looks more like his mom, and Arminas making the point, it's not about what you look like, it's about character. Others of the house of Hador bear themselves otherwise, and Tuor among them. For they use courtesy, and they listen to good counsel, holding the lords of the west in awe. But you, it seems, he says to Turin, will take counsel with your own wisdom, or with your sword only, and you speak haughtily. After the messengers left, we learn that all the more fell became the mood of Turin, and he would by no means listen to their counsels. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that if he and Tuor met, Tuor might not be walking away from the meeting. I mean, Turin is ticked. He's searching for his family. He's been deceived by the dragon. He's heard nothing but, from his position, bad things about Tuor. That is, what a great guy he is and how you're nothing like him. So I'm not so sure that Tuor would be in a great spot to introduce himself to Turin. As for it changing anything, no. Turin's going to Turin no matter what. And Tuor getting in the way of his cousin as he went north to look for his kin would not have changed a thing, sadly. Well, folks, that wraps it up for Mailbag Monday. It's a great question, Becca. If you have a question that you'd like me to answer, please email it to barliman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Let him know it's for today's Tolkien Times, and I'll get to it as soon as possible, with priority going to supporters of the show on Patreon. Now, if you'd like to help me keep making this show better, please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to find out how you can join the TTT Content Council, get a bonus episode each week, and more. And please join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Tolkien Tuesday, as we learn more about the professor himself. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're listening to it on a podcast app, follow or subscribe there. And everybody, please follow @Tolkien Times on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.